Peace and power and elevation be to all the beautiful people out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. I want to say salam alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak to all the beautiful brothers and sisters out there that celebrating this wonderful day of Ramadan. So today I am going to get into the topic about someone who was considered as a polymath, a psychologist, a physician, all of that. His name was Zayd Al-Balkhi. I'm gonna say again, Zayd Al-Balkhi. All right. So, so the interesting thing about him was, I believe he was Persian. Yeah, he was Persian, and by him being Persian, right? He was also he was part of the golden era of the scientific community during that time period, during the medieval time. And he was like one of the prominent figures. So his main study was focused on philosophy and psychology, what we know today is neuroscience and all of that. So with that being said, you will see that modern science got a lot of its inspiration from those in the golden age period. Okay. And also many others. But one day there's going to be a topic that I want to cover regarding to science, okay, and connection to other things. So I am going to get into that one day, all right? But I want to put my focus on this subject matter, okay? I want to focus on this individual and the work that this person has done. So because I found it very intriguing. One of my favorite subjects is psychology and sociology and anthropology. Those are my favorite subjects. So when I read about this individual and when I did the previous videos about Islamic psychology, I said, well, I got to check this person out. I got to look into him. And that way I could be able to share the information. So what I want to do is make sure that people subscribe and hit the notification bell, share my channel, like my channel, all that great stuff. I don't even have to go any further than that. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So now, before I even talk about Zayd, let's look at what is a polymath. Because many people may not be familiarized with the term polymath, all right? Okay, so let's go ahead. So what a polymath is, right, comes from the Greek word polymathis, means having learned much, or homo universal means universal human. Okay, so a polymath is an individual whose knowledge spans a substantial number of subjects known to draw on complex bodies of knowledge to solve specific problems. Okay, and it says in Western Europe, the first work to use the term polymathy in its title was published in 1603 by Johann von Warwin, a Hamburg philosopher. Von Warwin defined polymathy as knowledge of various matters drawn from all kinds of study, ranging freely through all the fields of the discipline as far as human mind, with unwearied industry is able to pursue them. Von Warwin lists erudition or erudition, literature, philology, philomathy, which means the love of knowledge, or basically the love of studying and the love of learning. Okay, that's what philomathy is. Polyhistory as synonyms. All right. So the earliest recorded use of the term in English language is from 1624 in the second edition of the Anatomy of Mahogany or McKinley. Oh yeah, no, not mahogany. Was it Melicanley? Yeah, the Anatomy of Melicanley by Robert Bruton. The form polymathis is slightly older, first appearing in the diatribe upon the first part of the late history of tithes of Richard Montagu in 1621. Use in English of the similar term, polyhistor, dates from the late 16th century. All right, so and go down, it says polymaths includes the great scholars or thinkers of the Renaissance and Enlightenment who excel at several fields in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the arts. In the Italian Renaissance, the idea of polymath was allegedly expressed by Leon Battista Alberti, a polymath himself, in the statement that a man can do all things if he will. Okay, Godfrey Wilhelm Leibniz has often been seen as a polymath. Al-Biruni was also a polymath. Leonardo da Vinci uh, was a Hildegard Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson are all other well-known and celebrated polymaths. All right, so embodying a basic tenet of Renaissance humanism that humans are limitless in their capacity for development, the concept led to the notion that people should embrace all knowledge and develop their capacity as fully as possible. This is expressed in the term Renaissance man, often applied to the gifted people of that age who sought to develop their abilities in all areas of accomplishment: intellectual, artistic, social, physical, and spiritual. All right. Okay, so real quick, we're going to look at the term Renaissance man, right? So the term Renaissance man was first recorded in written English in the early 20th century. It is used to refer to great thinkers living before, during, or after the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci has often been described as the archetype of the Renaissance man, a man of unquestionable curiosity and feverishly inventive in imagination. Many notable polymaths lived during the Renaissance period, a cultural movement that spanned roughly the 14th through the 17th century that began in Italy in the late Middle Ages and later spread to the rest of Europe. These polymaths had a rounded approach to education that reflected the ideas of the humanists of the time. A gentleman or courtier of that era was expected to speak several languages, play a musical instrument, write poetry, and so on, thus fulfilling the Renaissance ideal. All right. So, for those of you that don't know what the term Renaissance means rebirth. Okay. So basically, it's to show the rebirth of man by being able to acquire the general knowledge. So a polymath is somebody who has general knowledge, right, or of general studies. Okay, so you have knowledge on general studies. So you have people who have degrees in general studies, which will make them a polymath. All right, a lot of our ancestors, right, that came before us, they were polymathic. They were polymaths because they had various forms of knowledge and they had multiple degrees and they was able to have multiple skills they was able to acquire and make useful. So we will come to learn when we study our history, our African American ancestors or African ancestors, a lot of them were polymath. And that's just how it was. You should, at that time, it would be better to be a polymath because you will have multiple skills under your belt. So if you can't get into one field, you can get into another field, and then you can get into another field of study, etc. So it's always good to be that way. Now, but one day I'm gonna get into the subject about the philomath and epistemophilic or epistemophilia, right? Or philonos. All right, so I'm gonna get into all of that. Okay. And this is why I say that we all should be diversified when it comes to our knowledge. I mean, you're not going to know every single thing, but you got to be able to learn multiple subjects or be familiarized with multiple subjects. So that way you can be able to share the information, be able to teach others. All right. And be able to always have a skill set, because if one thing doesn't work out, then you always got something else that you can fall on. And, you have to make sure these things are your passion, your drive and motivation. All right. So let me go ahead and get back to the subject of today, the topic of today. Okay. So now I'm going to take you to jstor.org, JSTOR.org, which stands for Journal Storage. All right, so this here comes from the International Institute of Islamic Thought. All right, so the chapter title is Who Was Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi? All right, so the book title is Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi, Substance of the Soul, all right, which I currently have, so I'm going to go over that as well. And it says the book subtitle, The Cognitive Behavior Therapy of a 9th Century Physician. All right, and again, was published by the International Institute of Islamic Thought. Okay, so this is scholarly journal, by the way. Okay, so who was Abu Zayd al-Balkhi? So Abu Zayd al-Balkhi was an encyclopedic genius whose profound contribution to knowledge covered many diverse fields that would seem to our modern minds to be unrelated to each other. He is also considered to be one of the world's first known cognitive psychologists, astonishingly centuries ahead of his time, studying and suggesting cognitive treatments to anxiety and mood disorder. A polymath and prolific writer, he authored more than 60 books and manuscripts, meticulously researching disciplines as varied in scope as geography, medicine, theology, politics, philosophy, poetry, literature, Arabic grammar, astrology, astronomy, mathematics, biography, ethics, sociology, as well as others. Although excelling in many fields, his fame as a great scholar came actually as a result of his work in geography, leading him to become the founder of what is known today as Baki School of Terrestrial Mapping. Regrettably, most of these valuable documents, handwritten manuscripts, have either been lost or lie concealed in museums or in accessible libraries. All right. So similarity, very little has been written by way of biography. Most of what we know about al-Balkhi come from a single biographer, Zayd Al-Balkhi, in a well-known volume of the biographies of poets and men of letters. Mujan al-Udaba al-Hamawi states that al-Balkhi's full name was Abu Zayd Ahmad ibn Zayd al-Balkhi, and that he was born in the year 235 AH, or which is 849 CE, in a small village called Shamasi Tayan in the Persian province of Baki, which is now part of Afghanistan. Aside from noting that he received his early education from his father, Al-Mawai does not mention any other information about al-Balkhi's childhood. He does, however, provide some detailed information on his youth and endeavors to educate himself in the sciences and art of his time. Okay, Al-Hamawi chronicles that one of al-Balkhi's student, Abu Muhammad al-Hassan ibn al-Razari, described him to be a slim man of medium height, deep brown complexion, and protruding eyes, with a face bearing the marks of smallpox. He was generally silent and contemplative, thus exhibiting a reserved, shy personality. This description of his personality, added to the meticulous nature of his vast and rigorously written studies in modern terminology, allow us to infer al-Balkhi to be a highly introvert yet brilliant scholar. And that was usually what happened. You know, those who are very introvert, they usually be more intellectual and more brilliant minded. You know what I'm saying? They tend to be more brilliant minded. So those who are introvert are those who are a little bit more brilliant minded. I'll give you an example. The guy that written the 48 Laws of Power, right? Which is Robert Greene, and the Laws of Human Nature. In actuality, when I seen one of his interviews, right? He's an introvert. In actuality, he doesn't do well with doing interviews. And you could tell just by how he answered questions and his body language. He does not do well with interviewing. And as a matter of fact, he's a Zen Buddhist, That's the interesting part about it. So the guy that wrote the 48 Laws of Power, the laws of human nature, and he did a book with 50 laws of power, what's it, laws of seduction, all these different 33 strategies war, all the books that he has written. This guy's an introvert. The guy is an introvert, and he's a Zen Buddhist, and he's very shy when he does interviews. I happened to see the interview myself. I said, wow, this is interesting. A man like him, he's so shy and he's very introvert, but he's writing a book like this, like the 48 Laws of Power, which is equivalent to the modern day version of Machiavelli's book, The Prince. But that's what it tends to be. See, the ones that tend to be very intellectual are the ones that are very shy and they very introvert. They don't do well with communication like that. They just keep to themselves. All right. I'm not saying all introverts are very smart, but typically they are, the intellectual ones usually be those who are introvert. That's all I'm saying. All right. Let's see. Where did I stop at? Okay. Now it says what also seemed apparent is that he preferred seclusion and contemplation to socializing with friends or attending parties, because there is no mention in his biography of either. Whether association with intimate friends or attendance of lavish parties, by lavish meaning eating, listening to music, and or captivating Arabic poetry coming in the Abashid era, this conclusion is strongly supported the more we read Al-Hamwani account of him. If Al-Baki had mixed in social circles as early Muslim physicians such as Abu al-Faraj ibn Hindu and Abu Bakr al-Razi had done, we would have known more about his personal life and more about the fate of his missing great contribution. For example, we know that Ibn Hindu's treatise Mataf al-Tib wa Mahaj al-Talub, the key to medicine and the student guide, one of the greatest contributions to medicine of the 11th century, was the product of a request made by friends. In his introduction to this inimitable treatise, Ibn Hindu states, some of my learned friends have looked through my book entitled A Treatise Encouraging the Study of Philosophy. Its easily understood style made them want a similar treatise on medicine. So I undertook to compose such a treatise for them, taking pains to make it accessible, and called it the key to medicine. All right. So it was Ibn al-Hindu's sociability and reverence for friendship that enabled the legacy of this priceless historical document to be left to us. Similarly, it was fascination with music and musical parties that led al-Razi to one of his greatest medical inventions. Al-Razi was a famous musician before becoming one of the most distinguished physicians of all time. All right. So it says, yet his great medical success did not weaken his love for music, and he would invite musicians to his house to play in the evenings with instruments such as violin and lutes, the strings of which were made from animal intestine. At one of his parties, his guests stayed far into the night and tried to carry their instruments back, left them in al-Razi's care. Now al-Razi's kept a few domesticated monkeys in the house for medical research, and one of these cut the strings off the instruments and ate them. Al-Razi decided to use the incident for a scientific experiment. Keeping the monkey under close observation, he examined its feces for remains of the strains. Nothing appeared, and he realized that the strain had been fully digested. This resulted in one of medicine's greatest invention, the use of dissolving cat gut strains to stitch wounds. All right. So although some historians of Islamic medicine credit al-Zahrawi with invention of dissolving stitchers or shitters, it was in fact al-Razi as both a musician and a physician who made this great discovery. The point being that science sometimes finds its inspiration and creativity, and also, as in this case, that of Ibn Hindu by way of simple sociability. All right. We should also be grateful for Al-Baki's introspective and introverted personality, and that it was this and its concomitant traits that bestowed on him the patient and astute clinical acuity to write Mashali al-Aband while al-Afuz without introspective analytical thought and penetrative clinical perception. Al-Bati would not, in the 9th century, have been able to write in such detail about psychosomatic disorders, to be able to differentiate between psychosis and neurosis, to categorize depression as normal, reactive, and endogenous, or to give a detailed exposition on the use of cognitive therapy in treating psychological disorders. As he rightly asserted in his manuscript, no scholars before him had written a medical treatise of this kind. As mentioned earlier, Al-Balkhi was not only a great physician, but also a polymath, an eminent geographer, and a great Muslim theologian. He was also a master of Arabic prose and not argumentative. In describing his eloquence, Al-Waziri, as quoted by Al-Hamawi, states that when Al-Bahi spoke, it was as if a shower of gems had fallen. He was unsurpassed in expression. Al-Waziri compares him with Al-Jahiz and Ali ibn Ubada al-Rahani, the two most prominent writers of his time, and quotes the linguists of the time, stating that Al-Baki was more articulate than both, since his words were more eloquent and he was able to elucidate any topic with ease, whereas in comparison, Al-Jahiz was verbose and Al-Rahani too laconic. So in describing Baki's style of writing, Al-Hamawi notes that his great knowledge of classical and modern science gave to his written work the style of philosophers and the eloquence of men of letters. Some of his writings have indeed become wise saying and proverbs. For example, if someone praises you for what is not in you, then you cannot trust that he will not blame you for what is not in you. Religion is the greatest of philosophies. Therefore, man cannot be a philosopher until he become a worshiper. The greatest medicine is knowledge. Let's think about that for a moment. Religion is the greatest philosophy. Therefore, man cannot be a philosopher until he become a worshiper. Just giving in that some thought for a moment. That's pretty deep. That's a pretty deep way of saying it. Never thought of it like that. Anyways, then the other one, the greatest medicine is knowledge. Well, yeah, that's factual. I can agree that the greatest medicine is knowledge, because without knowledge, then how would you be able to come up with practical solutions? Okay. Wow. Let's go further down. Let's see. It says Al-Baki did not earn this prestigious scholarly status without humbly enduring the hardships of patient learning. Al-Hamawi notes that he traveled from Baki, his hometown, to Baghdad to reside there for 8 long years in search of religious and secular knowledge and to acquire the scholarly methodology of his time. Among his great teachers was the renowned philosopher Abu Yusuf al-Kindi. According to Al-Hamawi, during this period, Al-Baki became deeply engrossed in conflicting philosophical issues that confounded his religious beliefs and caused him to divert from the right path of Sunni Islam. This led some religious Muslim scholars to accuse him of deviance, so much so, in fact, that at one time he was considered an adherent to the Shiism of Imaniya or al-Zadiyya, and other times adherent of the Mu'tazila school of thought. This confirms our conjecture of Al-Baki being a young, lonely, reflective introvert without intimate friends who at the time could have helped him out of his spiritual crisis. All right. So basically, he done went through multiple schools of thoughts. All right. He went through multiple schools of thoughts to try to find himself where he belongs. All right. So it says it was a turbulent era. In any case, the Abbasid Caliphate had lost much of its powerful grip over its people, resulting in theological upheaval and the rise of destructive movements such as Al-Karamata, and what has come to be known as the Negro Revolutionary Movement, circa 868 CE, which almost brought about the Caliphate's downfall. And then goes on and says, however, this youthful state of confusion did not last long. Al-Hamawi asserted after Baghdad's culture shock, al-Baki finally established himself on the right path of Sunni school, as apparent in his work, Kitab Nazim al-Quran, which exceeded all that had been written in this field. Furthermore, unlike the Shia, he was annoyed by those who gave preference to some of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam over others, and detested the pomposity of Arabs over non-Arabs. After completing his study in Baghdad, al-Baki returned to Bak and there took up the post of Katib, or secretary to Prince Ahmad ibn Saud ibn Hashim al-Morazi, the ruler of Bak and its suburbs. In fact, the ruler offered him a ministerial as well as a writing position. However, al-Baki turned down the former and accepted the latter. The ruler respected his choice and paid him well. Again, al-Baki's choice confirms our belief as to his unsociable nature. Limiting himself to the role of Katab allowed al-Baki more time to reclusive in depth study, and was perhaps due to his personality trait that he avoided the more prestigious but socially demanded job of minister. Al-Baki continued to research and write until the age of 88, avoiding the temptation of jobs of better status and higher salary. In relation to this, Hamawi narrates the king of Khurajan himself invited al-Baki to assist him in his kingdom, but he politely declined. He visited Baghdad for a second time, but quickly returned to Bak and lived there until his death in the year 934 CE. Okay, so the subject of this book is al-Baki's 9th century manuscript, Mashali al-Adan wa al-Afuz, which means substance for bodies and soul, comprised of 361 pages, located in Ayasofya Library, Istanbul. Written in clear, easy to read Arabic, the handwritten documents consist of 268 pages devoted to the substance of the body and 73 pages to the substance of the soul or psyche. All right, so basically, I'm not going to read any further on this, okay? I'm not going to spend too much time. But this is the account about al-Baki, Abu Sa'id al-Baki's life. So basically, Abu Sa'id or Zayed was not a very sociable man. He was very more introvert, and he was more so focused on his literature, his writing. That's what he was about. He wasn't trying to be some type of ruler. He wasn't trying to be some type of caliph. He wasn't trying to be anything. He just wanted to write, and he just wanted to focus on his studies. That was it. That's all he wanted to do. So he really didn't have a social life. He was very introvert. Now, people may argue that, well, being an introvert is not so good. It's not good to be an introvert. It's not good to just be quiet all the time and just stay to yourself. You got to be more sociable. That may be true. I can agree. I mean, yes, you have to eventually socialize with your environment. You can't just be so stuck. You have to be able to interact with those around you. Me, myself, I can relate to being an introvert because that's what I am. I stay to myself a lot. I don't really like to engage in a large gathering like that or be around a lot of people that much. Every now and then, I may socialize. Depends on who the individuals are and depends on what the conversation is. Depends on if I can be able to have some type of amusement with those individuals. But outside of that, I normally stay to myself. Like when I'm working, I stay to myself. I work. You know what I'm saying? I like to be to myself when I'm working because I like to stay focused on my work. That's just how I am. Now, once my work is done or whatever, I might socialize, I might laugh and joke a little bit, whatever. But outside of that, I like to get to my work. I like to get my job done and just keep it moving. And that's me. Okay. All right, so that's that information. And again, this source can be checked out. All right, I put it in my description box. So when you guys look at the video, you'll see it under the description box. Okay. All right, so that's a picture of him. Okay. That's a picture of him. So let's see what else we can find about Abu Zayed. Okay. All right, so right here, it says figures of the regions. His figure of the regions consisted chiefly of geographical maps. It led him to founding the Baki School of Terrestrial Mapping in Baghdad. The geographers of this school also wrote extensively of peoples, products, and custom areas in the Muslim world with little interest in the non-Muslim realms. All right, so substance of body and soul, right? Principle of interaction. His balance between technical terminology and common ethical sense could be found in his monograph where he talks about the interaction between the elements of the body, season, and the traditional non-natural health elements such as food and sleep. All right. Okay, so he wrote about a lot of things. He wrote about mental health and mental illness, cognitive and medical psychology and cognitive therapy, psychophysiology and psychosomatic medicines. Okay. Phobias. He talks about phobias. Sexual attributes. He speaks on sexual attributes. And he gets into the work about politics. All right. So let's go over the first paragraph. All right, the first sentence of each of them. So in Islamic psychology, the concept of mental health and mental hygiene were introduced by Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi, who often related to spiritual health, in his Masali al-Adan wal al-Afis. He was the first to successfully discuss disease related to both the body and the soul. He used the term al-Tib al-Rahini to describe spiritual and psychological health, and the term Tib al-Kab to describe mental medicine. All right. And then the cognitive and medical psychology. Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi was the first to differentiate between neurosis and psychosis and the first to classify neurotic disorder and pioneer cognitive therapy in order to treat each of these classified disorders. Okay. He classified neurosis into 4: emotional disorder, fear and anger, anxiety, aggression, sadness, and depression and obsession. He further classify three types of depression: normal depression or sadness, in endogenous depression, originating from within the body, and reactive clinical depression originating from outside the body. All right, so then he goes on to talk about the psychophysiology and psychosomatic. The Muslim physician Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi was a pioneer of psychotherapy, psychophysiology, psychosomatic medicine. He recognized the body and the soul can be healthy or sick or balanced or imbalanced, and that mental illness can have both psychological or physiological causes. All right. Then he goes on to talk about the phobias. Abu Zayd al-Baki initially wrote about phobia in 9th century, calling it vaza. As of today, it is still defined in a similar manner as to what was described by al-Baki. Al-Baki details the disorder as an extreme type of fear that results in the anxiety level of a person spiking due to increase the depth of blood in the body. All right. So this caused the person to become shaky and disoriented, preventing them from making decisions in a timely manner. And then the sexual attributes. While the topic of sex is more widely discussed today, Al-Baki explored the subject in detail, specifically various sexual attributes and the effects that they have on an individual. Okay. And then go down to the politics. In a collection of works by Al-Tawhidi, Al-Baki described politics as an art that aims to contribute to the rise of a country. So let me read that again. Al-Baki describes politics as an art that aims to contribute to the rise of a country. Interesting. All right. It says, furthermore, he mentions 5 separate sources that plays into overall outcomes of politics. These include the tangible cause as corresponding to the subject affairs, the official reason as the overall well-being of the people, the driving force as the ruler's concern for the affairs of his subject, the purpose as the preservation of public welfare, as well as the instrumental cause consisting of using incitement and intimidation to achieve the goal. So I'm going to read again. 5 separate sources that play into the overall outcome of politics. These include the tangible cause as 1 is corresponding to the subject's affairs. 2 is the official reason as the overall well-being of the people. 3 is the driving force as the ruler's concern for the affairs of his subjects. 4 is the purpose as the preservation of public welfare. 5 is as well as the instrumental cause consisting of using incitement and intimidation to achieve the goal. That's very interesting. I must say, it's very interesting. Now, let's go ahead and look at the book that he written. Okay. All right, so this book right here, and I'm going to the first chapter. All right, so Substance of the Soul, the manuscript in brief, a summary by the translator. All right. So Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi, a 9th century genius of psychological medicine. Okay, so let's go down to the translation. All right, so it says, Al-Bakhi's introduction to his manuscript. In the name Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. All right, it's written in Arabic. My second essay, or part of this book, Substance of the Soul, falls into 8 chapters. The first chapter is elucidating the need for promoting the substance of the soul. The second chapter is on endeavoring to keep perpetuating the health of the soul. The third chapter is on making an effort to bring back the healthy condition of the soul if it loses it. The fourth chapter is on specifying and classifying the psychological symptoms and enumerating them. All right. The fifth is on suppressing anger and rage and obliterating them. The sixth chapter is on the methods used to tranquilize fear and panic. The seventh is on the methods of managing sadness and depression. And the eighth chapter is on how to ward off obsession of the chest and the harmful or negative inner speech of the soul. All right. So now it goes into the first part. Okay. So the first part is exposing the great needs for promoting the sustenance of the soul. Sustenance of the soul, my bad. In the first part of this book, we elucidate the knowledge and the practices required for the sustenance of the body by preserving its well-being. When healthy and reviving it back to health, it affects by symptoms of physical disorder or disease. We also gave a comprehensive presentation that informs the reader on how his body can benefit from the consumption of healthy food and medicines to perpetuate safety and guarantee health. In this second part of the book, we endeavor to give an explanation concerning the sustenance of the sustains of the soul and how to keep its components in a state of well-being and harmony in order to avoid the psychological symptom that it may face. So we start by saying that since man is composed of a body and soul, he is bound to face from each part of them fitness and weakness, health and sickness, or other symptoms that afflict his health in a negative way. The symptoms that afflict the body and upset its well-being are those such as fever, headaches, and various kinds of pains that affect the organs. The psychological symptoms that afflict a person are those such as anger, sorrow, fear, panic, and other similar manifestations. All right. So these psychological symptoms affect man much more frequently than bodily symptoms. Indeed, some people may also never suffer from any of most bodily symptoms throughout or most of their lives. In contrast, psychological symptoms induce man to suffer from them most of the time. Indeed, no man is saved in all his condition from feelings of distress, anger, sadness, or similar psychological symptoms. However, people differ with respect to intensity of their feelings in response to these symptoms. This is because each person responds according to his temperament and the foundation of his constitution. With respect to strength or weakness, some may be quick to become angry and some slow. Similarly, some may respond with excessive fear and panic with a cause with fearful things, and some with endurance and courage. And so one can differentiate between expecting responses of women and children and those with weak disposition in comparison to those with a strong natural disposition. Each person will respond according to the degree of his predisposition, whether it is high or low, or whether he finds the situation difficult to stand or weak in its effect. All right. So for this reason, no man should be heedless of being concerned with sustenance of his soul or neglectful in making an effort to shield it from disturbance and anxiety, which leads to an unhappy life. Such psychological symptoms can be comparable to bodily symptoms that can cause a person pain and illness and result in an agonizing situation. All right, so I'm just going to leave it right there. Okay. Again, the title of this book, right? So this book is basically deals like with the summary of it and also the translation of the book. So right here, which is Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi's Sustenance of the Soul, the cognitive behavior therapy of a 9th century physician. Now, I'm going to leave out with this last thought. Did Carl Jung kind of study into the works of Abu Zayd? The reason why I'm asking that because when I read this information and then compare it to Carl Jung, it's the similarity that's taking place. Because it was said that Carl Jung studied Sufism and he studied all the Islamic scholars, etc. Right? So it's kind of sound like something that Carl Jung would say, but this was way before his time period. This was way before Dr. Jung time period. All right. So as you can see, this man deals with what Carl Jung called today shadow works. All right. So when he talk about the soul and all of that and being able to revitalize and not only revitalize, but also deal with, how to sustain a healthy lifestyle, that sounds like shadow work to me when I listen to it. That's what it sounds like. That's what it seems like, shadow work. I'm very intrigued. I think that this happened to be one interesting person that I ever covered, one of my favorite people, that I would like to put down on the bucket list as far as reading his works. Because again, when we study, by me studying psychology and by me studying sociology and all these different various subject matters, this is one of the things that can really much help me of how they were doing things in the ancient time period, right? Or during the medieval time, and how it gradually came up to the modern times and how it impacted those in the scientific field of study or psychology field, etc. So I have learned so much. I hope that you guys have done the same. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please make sure you do so. Hit the notification bell, share my channel, and check out all the videos that I have on here. Also, I have all the list of the sources in my description link. So if you check out my description link, you can look it up for yourself if you want to check out the sources or whatnot. All right. Yep. But I pretty much like this man's work. Even though it's not much on his biography as far as his personal life is concerned, but it seemed like this man was just very studious and very intellectual, and he just was very focused on what he was doing. So somebody that's a polymath, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be a polymath because, again, you have multiple skills, you have multiple, you have various form of knowledge, and you can always go to something that you desire and that you like. All right, whatever don't work for you over here, then something work for you right here, and then something work for you right here. So it depends. All right. So you always want to be kind of like multi-dimensional when it comes to your knowledge, like be universal in a sense. And that's why I'm just kind of passionate when it comes to our people, studying various forms of knowledge and not just be stuck on one level of knowledge, because you have to be able to bring that diversity so you can be able to have multiple skill settings and be able to learn multiple things, and you can be able to discuss multiple things at a time. So, and that's kind of like what my channel is. Most of the time it's dealing with Black history, but also I deal with other fields of studies as well, deal with other subject matters because it's very important to me. All right. Other than that, that's all I have for today. And I hope everyone have a good one. Oh, I have one last article, but I'm not going to go into this article. This article is basically called The Arab and Muslim Contribution to Modern Neuroscience. So I don't really want to go into that. Yep. I don't really want to go into all of this or whatever, but it kind of just gives into how the Arabs and the Muslim played the contribution role into what we call today neuroscience. All right. But anyways, This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying peace and power elevation. Ramadan Mubarak to all the beautiful brothers and sisters out there, the Muslims in the community. I hope you guys have a great Ramadan. I hope you guys be safe. And everybody else, y'all have a good day, good evening, good afternoon, whatever your time zone may be. And I will reconnect with you all later. So with that being said, deuces. All right. Salam.